Okay, dude. So, first of all, welcome back to the podcast. How you doing today?
Yeah, bloody marvellous. I'll tell you what, it's 9:41 right now, and it's already been a belter of a morning. Sunshine in the UK, got some good news that I'll share with you later. And it's one of those days where, in the notebook, where he wakes up and he says there's magic in the air today. I've got that feeling about today, so let's see what happens.
Nice. Oh, beautiful. Well, as always, it's always a pleasure to talk with you, and I can't wait to get stuck in because so much has happened since you last came back on the podcast. So I'm just going to get stuck in, if that's all right, start asking you some questions.
Yeah, let's go down the rabbit hole.
Let's do it. So just for people that are tuning in now, so what is superconscious breakthrough therapy, and how is it different from meditation and other therapies?
Sure. So maybe just to give you a bit of background. So I've been doing hypnotherapy for almost 11 years now. I lived in a Buddhist temple for a couple of years learning meditation. I've trained in all sorts, as you know, lots of different modalities, all the letters after your name. They don't really mean anything, but there's plenty there. And what I found is that most hypnotherapy, most meditation, it's very much about taking someone to a very particular place to then make a change in their subconscious mind, and then lo and behold, it seems that some sort of magic happens. And what I found, and this was very much through a fluke, I'd love to say, well, I was a genius and I looked at the data, and it was just an absolute fluke where I was watching an old it was a Richard Bandler lecture. So it's one of the co-founders of NLP that he was doing back in the maybe 80s, early 90s. And he was talking about a body worker called Moshe. And what he did is he explained that most chiropractors are people who will see something that's out of alignment, and then they'll actively jam something back into place. And what this Moshe character would do is he would almost take them more out of alignment. The body would recognize something's wrong, and it would find a way to naturally return to its ideal state of alignment. And so people would get off the couch, and normally when you get off the couch after you've sort of seen a chiropractor, you feel like $1 million, but normally that sensation doesn't normally last. Normally 4 weeks later, you're back seeing the chiropractor. What Moshe would do is people would stand off the couch and they'd go, oh, bloody hell, it's not right here. And the way that Richard Bandler describes it, it's very over the top and exaggerated. Oh, they can only walk in circles, and they're basically limping. But what would happen is the body would start to go, oh, I can see how out of alignment we are. I'm going to start putting us back the way that we know how to. And what would happen is people would naturally start to make changes as they were walking, and they wouldn't need to go back to see a chiropractor. And so I thought, just off chance, I wonder if the brain's the same. Now, it turns out there's been a lot more research that's been done since that magical fluke that day. I think I was traveling at the time. I was in Bulgaria, and I thought, what would happen if the mind knows how to heal itself, if the mind knows how to take itself back into a state of coherence much better than an external therapist can? Which, even as I say it now, doesn't seem like a revolutionary idea, and yet that's what most therapy is born from. It's someone will go to a therapist with a problem at a very conscious level, and the therapist will try to help make that problem change with the knowledge that the therapist knows. So the physiotherapist will say, right, these are the exercises that I think you need to do based on what I'm seeing is out of alignment. The hypnotherapist will say, right, this is what we need to do in hypnosis, and I need to install these new beliefs to make those changes. And I started to realize, what if the mind could do that better? What if the subconscious mind, or I refer to it as the superconscious mind, what if it could do that better than an individual logically or consciously knows? What if that innate intelligence could do that better than the therapist? And it turns out that fluke was absolutely spot on. And when I started taking my hands off the steering wheel, guiding someone into a very unique state, and then allowing that mind to move itself back into coherence, I was seeing things that I'd never seen before. And even over the last year, I've been teaching this modality to other practitioners who have had, some of them, decades and decades of experience. I think one of our practitioners has had over 35 years of experience training all sorts of different hypnotic modalities, and they're still saying, I've never seen anything like it. Which is that suddenly all these changes that could take so long to occur are happening in minutes and sometimes seconds. So obviously I'm still excited about it because it's quite a weird and wonderful thing to witness. But in answer to your question, long-winded answer, superconscious breakthrough therapy is helping someone's super conscious, their innate intelligence knows what's right for them, that knows what coherence is for them at their unique level. It's about putting the keys of transformation back into their hands and for them to be able to make those changes all by themselves. And so what I often say to people who learn this process is that we take big pay promotions because we're helping people get extraordinary results in sometimes a tenth or sometimes, just a tiny fraction of the time. But all we're doing really is we're smiley doormen. We hold a door open, someone moves through, and the change happens all by itself for them in the right way at the right time. I hope that makes sense, but obviously I'm obviously happy to elaborate in whatever detail is necessary.
Yeah, smiley doorman. I like that. So I'll tell you what would be really useful. Just give us a flavour of like some of these transformations, because you're saying some things are happening in minutes, often quicker. So just break that down. Like what are these transformations that you've seen maybe in the last year since you came on the podcast? Hey, just pausing the podcast for a second to talk about daylight lenses, which are incredible for energy and focus. Now, you wouldn't do breath work in a smoke-filled room, but we do the visual equivalent all day long, sitting under harsh blue lights that wreck our eyes, crush our energy, and leave us foggy. And Raw Optics daylight lenses, they're like a breath of fresh air for your brain. Daylight lenses filter out damaging wavelengths of blue light from screens and artificial lights, while keeping the colours natural and the vision is sharp. And the results? More clarity, more calm, less strain. I wear these during the day when I'm on my computer or my phone, and they've become essential in my daily routine. Use TADB code 10 at rawoptics.com for 10% off. That's TADB 10 for 10% off. Try them and you will notice a difference. Cheers. Let's get back on with the podcast.
Sure. So I'll give you a few that come to mind that may be quite dramatic. There was a gentleman who'd had 12 years of psychotherapy. He was a war veteran who went through this process. 17 minutes later, no longer had PTSD. So there were a set of horrible instances that happened over the course of around about 2 years while he was away, while he was on training. And I don't even know what those memories were. We didn't need to go into it. He didn't need to relive it. It's just what his body was telling him was, I don't know how to process this thing that happened over a decade ago, and I'm going to show you how to try and do it constantly through waking you up in the middle of the night, because all I want to do is move back into coherence. And what we did is in 17 minutes, we allowed that disharmony in his brain to move back into harmony so he could think about any of those memories, any of those instances, any of the beliefs that came off the back of it, like, I'm broken, I'll never heal. And that was no longer an issue for him. And that obviously blew him away. That's a very extreme example. I had one person in, I thought you might ask a question like this. I was thinking about this before we started. I had one person who had, I won't go into the details, one, because I don't know them that well, because we don't need to speak about horrific things that have happened. But he had a set of horrendous circumstances happen around about 2 decades ago. And within, it's just going to sound like such BS, but it was around about 20 to 30 seconds. That no longer was an issue for him. And at first he laughed, then he got really angry because he said, I've been carrying this with me for 2 decades. This has affected my relationship, it's affected my career, it's affected my business, it's affected relationships with my family. It's like my day-to-day emotional state has been affected by this incoherence that's been sitting with me for the last 2 decades. And I didn't realize I was around about less than 60 seconds away from being able to make that change. So he was actually quite angry that change had happened as quickly as it did, but at the same time extremely relieved and grateful, etc. And obviously a different man afterwards in the other sessions that we got to have together. Another nice example that's maybe a little bit friendlier is when you take someone from not necessarily a horrendous place to an okay place, but from a good place to a great place, is within, again, around about 10 minutes. I had an investment banker that I was working with in Canary Wharf, London, closed his eyes, opened them again and went, I know exactly the trades I need to make tomorrow. And then I got a text from him the next day saying, this is the best trading day I've had in over 10 years. Because we were just able to move the brain into coherence. When I say coherence, what I mean is, when we did the brain scans together, and hopefully I'll be able to get the editor to show those, what essentially is happening is when I say moving the brain into coherence, it's the brain can see reality closer for what it is without the baggage of the past, which leads to things like less stress, less brain fog, but more interestingly, superior decision making and coherent action. And so what he was able to do is he was able to look or almost memorize the data that he'd been looking at earlier that day, but without the lens of the fear that he might get the trade wrong, without the imposter syndrome, without all the other concerns that might cloud judgment when it comes to taking action. And he was then able to see that without the noise, so clarity without noise, and take executive action. And lo and behold, the results spoke for themselves. In fact, I got a message this morning. I've got someone here who this is just a text message. I say this morning, it was actually last night. In fact, it's my phone's off for this interview, so I'll just get it up here. Where I'll just read you the last couple of sentences here. I feel I got everything I needed from my sessions. My money mindset is completely different. Lots happened since. I'm literally back to how I used to be, but without any imposter syndrome in what I'm going to be doing. So these are things that can happen where when the brain moves back into coherence, it's no more baggage, clarity without noise, intuition and deep knowing, embodiment, so normally greater states of presence. What else is there? Like absolutely fearless responsibility, creative power, but my favourite probably is unified will. So it's the idea of all of me wants the same thing and can take action towards the same thing. These are the kinds of things that you just get to see happen. I say without fail. I mean, I think I've offered maybe four refunds in my life doing this process. So you get to see it almost happen every single time, like 99.9% of the time. Because remember, it's not me that's doing the change. It's just getting them into a space where the brain can make the change safely, quickly, and effectively for them. So yeah, really cool things that you get to see. And in fact, one of our practitioners did something on a client that I didn't even know was possible, which was, this was a gentleman who had a terminal illness, and because he knew he was going to pass away, frankly, there's no soft way of putting it, he was suicidal, because he thought, what's the point? And that's what's been really exciting over the last year when other people have been using this modality, is she was able to do something that I didn't think was possible, which was she was able to get him to a place where he was at peace with his own death, which is something you would normally hear with things like psychedelic assisted therapy. But to be able to do that with this process, again, within minutes, being able to see the process for what it is without that fear, I didn't even know that was possible. So my own limiting beliefs with what the brain can and can't do are being broken. And when I heard that was only about a month ago. So yeah, there's some really, really cool things that we're starting to see with this, but it's still early days. Like we still don't know where the limits are. I don't think I've seen any yet, but that doesn't mean that we won't come across them. But the most fascinating thing is I had another client a year ago who was actually taking, I think it was MDMA therapy and psilocybin therapy, obviously at different times. And she said that was like getting on a Concorde to being able to make change, but using this process was like getting in a rocket ship. So there's some really cool things that are happening, but I'm starting to just ramble about how great this thing is, but it's just, I'm more giddy and curious to see what else this thing can do.
Yeah, no, it's very cool. And you know, if people haven't seen our previous podcasts, spoiler alert, I've gone through some of these therapies with you, and they've been wonderful. And we got my brain scanned, and we've got the before and after shots, which people can check out. I just finished the Sopranos for like the 8th time. And I know you haven't seen a lot of it, but for those that have, Tony Soprano, the gangster's in therapy for like a decade, and he just leaves at the end, and he's actually no better off than when he started. And then I think I shared it with you actually, saw a wonderful reel about therapy where there's a guy in the street interviewing people. He was interviewing therapists, and he was saying, how many people have you cured? Do you remember this clip?
Yeah, familiar with it.
Yeah. So he's going through the clip, and he's like, and they're all going, oh, no. And I think nobody said they'd cured anybody with talk therapy. So I would love to just get your thoughts on like, how is that even possible when it seems to be like the thing, especially in America, and what's going on there? Why is that not getting the results that we would have thought it would have got, and why is your stuff different to that?
Okay, so first of all, that's a really wonderful but a very big question. So there's a few different pieces to that. The first thing that I would start by saying is like the word cure. That very much is the C word in this profession. I don't even know what curing really means. I mean, it's my personal belief, at least, and maybe this is part of the reason why I've been able to see the results I have, is that absolutely no one that I've ever seen, no matter whatever horrendous abuse they've had, whatever changes they want to make, I've never seen anyone that I thought was broken. So the idea of curing someone that was never broken to begin with just seems like something that it feels incorrect to say, right? It's like me saying, "Do you mind if I mend your son?" You're like, "What do you mean mend my son? There's nothing wrong with him." Right, that's the way that word personally feels to me. So when I say cure, it's more helping people move into coherence would be the right thing. But answer to your question as to why that doesn't work, there's a few pieces. I'm trying to work out where the best place to start. First one is that it's probably very problem oriented rather than solution focused. So trying to work out, I think you can spend years, and I've worked with people in the past who absolutely have done this. They spent years trying to work out why they are the way they are. Why is it that I feel this way when this happens? Why is it that I want to make changes in my business, but when it comes to actually executing, I just don't do it? That's a very natural question for the brain to want to answer. The problem is even when you get that answer, it won't move you any closer to where you want to be. It can, and again, I don't know what the swearing situation is like on this podcast. The why question is fabulous mental masturbation. Because what a why question can do is, one, it will keep you exactly where you are. So the brain kind of likes it because it's going to be familiar, right? Two, it will give you the illusion of progress though. Sometimes if we feel like we know why we are, the reason I feel like this is because my mother was a narcissist. Okay, what now? The reason that my business failed was because of, okay, what are we going to do about it? I worked with, I think I used this example last time in the podcast, but I think it's a great explanation. I worked with someone who had I think she'd had 4 years of psychotherapy. She'd gone on several different retreats. She tried meditation. She tried journaling. And then another 2 years passed to be able to help her process a sexual assault that had happened in her apartment. And she knew exactly why she couldn't feel comfortable with another man in the room. She knew why she wasn't able to open herself and be vulnerable to another man. She knew all the whys, and she tracked it even back to things in her childhood that could have caused that. And yet 15 minutes later, after we went through this process, it was no longer an issue for her. And so she knew the reason why, but it didn't get her any closer to having the relationship that she wanted, feeling comfortable around men. And so I think a lot of therapies, first of all, they focus on the why a lot. And what can happen is it ends up becoming a little bit like a familiar / illusion of progress hedonic treadmill that can happen. Every single week I go see the therapist and I feel like I'm a little bit closer into understanding why. Right? That feels like growth. It really does. And growth is addictive. Right? I think Tony Robbins often says if he had to replace happiness with another word, it would be progress. And so very often a lot of therapy, even with high performers, if they're starting to understand more as to why, they know why they're doing what they're doing, it will feel like they're making progress in the sessions. We really got to the root as to what may have caused those things. It's like, well, even if you know the why, it doesn't make a difference. Now, I don't focus on why because I honestly don't believe at this point that our conscious minds, at least, are smart enough to even know the reason why. I think Tony Robbins also gives an example of an experiment where people are given hot or cold coffee before a set of questions about how they thought the person was who gave them the cup of coffee, and actually they didn't know the reason why they felt, actually I quite like this person. This person was a little bit standoffish. This person was a little bit warm, and it turns out it was just that it was the kind of coffee that it gave them. So the whys really don't matter. That's the big one. The second one is, I found personally there's only 3 reasons why someone doesn't achieve what they want to achieve. The first one is clarity in where they're going. The second one is their body isn't generating enough energy. And the third one is subconscious blocks. And what I think could happen, again, it's the reason that a lot of people say, I've seen a hypnotherapist and it didn't work. It's because the hypnotherapist was only looking at subconscious blocks. Whereas it might be that the other reason that those conventional therapists that you're speaking about aren't getting the results with their clients that maybe they would hope is because they haven't even looked to see if that client knows where they want to go yet. And they haven't worked out to see if their body is generating enough energy. If someone is a newborn parent and they're sleeping 3 to 4 hours per night and they say, I feel anxious all the time, is it because of the way that my mother treated me when I was younger? The first thing that any sensible person who understands anything about holistic health would say is, let's just get your sleep up first so you're not drunk. Let's get you sober and then let's start answering that question. Because your body can't generate sensible answers when it's literally not generating energy properly. So there's a few things there. I think 1, it's not holistic. 2, they're focusing on the wrong thing. And 3, I think a lot of therapists probably have their own biases with how long change, quote unquote, should take. Right now, there's going to be a psychotherapist that's heard some of the very real results that I've been speaking about, and I've got plenty of video testimonials for these, by the way, and also screenshots of real things that people have said, and they're going to go, no, it's wrong. It feels like too much of a gimmick. It absolutely flies in the face of all the years of therapy training they did. And so the therapist bias, focusing on the wrong thing and not treating them holistically would be my starting point as to why they're probably not getting the results that I think their clients probably deserve at this point.
I would love to get your thoughts on it's not a recent phenomenon, but it's very in at the moment, which is releasing trauma. And I know you've got your kind of thoughts on this. So like, what does that mean to you, if anything? How would you break that down? Can you, quote unquote, release trauma? Why do you think it's so popular at the moment? It's all over the internet.
So there's a few reasons. So I mean, obviously you and I have spoken to other people who have said there's actually, even in the somatic releases, there doesn't seem to be any genuine data out there that says that things like TRE can release very particular pieces of trauma. What we do know is when the body shakes, or if the body goes through a somatic experience, it feels great very often because there's fascia release. Very often there can be tensions in the muscle, and things like serotonin starts to flow very often after a form of stretching, etc. So it can be a very therapeutic experience. And I personally love things like TRE. Whenever my body starts to shake and do that thing, I feel like $1 million afterwards. But when it comes to releasing very specific trauma, again, I haven't seen any real good data to say this person had a release and then that memory or set of memories or period of time doesn't seem to bother them again. But I think watching someone, let's say they go through the process that I do, it's extremely boring to watch. And actually, as an experience, the joke that we often make with clients is that it's really transformational, but it's underwhelming. When you see someone on Instagram shaking and screaming and suddenly going, oh, it was the most amazing, intense experience I've ever had, and that's a very, very sexy thing that is much easier to go viral than someone who, I mean, you've gone through the experience, their head goes down a little bit and their fingers twitch a little bit, and then they go, oh yeah, I don't know why that thing bothered me as much as it should. Actually, that big block that I had about going to the next level, it was just a stupid story. I think I'm ready to just do that. Right? One is a much sexier of an experience than the other, I'd say. And so because trauma, I think, has become sort of the big word recently with explosions of someone like Gabor Mate, who I think has done some wonderful work. But yeah, when it comes to trying to release trauma, I don't really know what's meant by that personally. And then more importantly, at least for me, I believe, is after that experience, are you doing anything differently? Right? If someone has, let's say a company and they want to go to the next level and they think that trauma has been held within them, and they go on some sort of retreat where they go through a dark retreat or they go through this big release and they go, wow, all these realizations came to the top of my head. What are they doing with that? Are they then making different actions the next day? Are they treating people better? Are they living each day in a greater state of presence? I don't know. I personally haven't met someone yet. Doesn't mean it's not possible, but I haven't met anyone where they say, yes, all these realizations happened, or yes, I released all this stuff, and then look at the way that my life changed afterwards. It might be I feel a little bit lighter, but frankly, you can feel a little bit lighter after any kind of exercise, stretching, any kind of moment of tears or endorphin release. So I'm not against it. I just haven't seen enough data to tangibly go, someone went through this experience and now look at all the things that have actively changed in their life, look at the different actions they're taking, look at the different beliefs that they have as a result of it.
So if someone comes to you and they say, look, I've got all this trauma, and they go through the process, what words would you use to describe that transformation? If it's not a release, is it a process, an acceptance? Like, just what would that be from your perspective when they've had the trauma, they've gone through the process, and they're out the other side?
So what I would say first of all is trauma is something that I've dealt with a lot, but it's not my specialty anymore. So I don't actively work with people for PTSD or trauma. It's just something that I was doing several years ago. So that's one thing to say, just in case people suddenly start messaging me all about trauma. It's like, I'm not going to be your expert there. I've helped people with PTSD, CPTSD, and all the likes. It's just not the thing that I'm most passionate about. But the words I would use is, first of all, I probably wouldn't refer to it as trauma anymore, because I think that becomes such a loaded word. I'd want to label it with a different term, which is an incoherence, or a consistent state of vigilance. Right? Words that seem less offensive and emotionally embodying, just so we can start to have the permission to see that for what it is, right? Which is an incoherence. When we're talking about trauma, all we're really talking about is an accelerated rate of learning that the brain doesn't feel like it can catch up with. Trauma is when the brain went, I thought reality was like this, and then reality did something that was like this, and I do not feel like they're in alignment. And what my job is to help them do is to just move it back into alignment so the brain can understand and process. So in answer to your question, how would I talk about the transformation that happens? I'd say we just helped the brain unlearn the event that they went through, or safely process the emotions that were stored in one area of the brain. And we helped other areas of the brain make sense as to what was going on with that. We helped it either rapidly unlearn or accelerate the learning and the processing in a safe, fast, and effective manner. Which again sounds underwhelming, doesn't it? That is not a sexy equation. The results and the actions and the way that someone feels afterwards, very, very sexy. The process, it sounds like you're on an assembly line. It sounds very boring.
What are you passionate about these days then?
Nowadays, quite honestly, I'm passionate about seeing other people use this modality. When I hear the results that other people have been able to achieve, that has been so cool. Because all of this just stemmed from a fluke, and I'm not the grandmaster in any way. I'm someone who's seen results that I know a lot of people have never seen before, and I've gotten very used to seeing the closest thing to quote unquote real magic happen. But where I get the real buzz is when other people are learning this and they're saying, "Hey, look at this thing that I saw with this client that I've never seen before in 30 years of practice." That will light me up like a Christmas tree.
And so, if people are listening to this, who is like an ideal person to go through this process? Like, who would you say would be best fit to potentially go through this with you now?
So, I mean, there's a few things. So, who I work with personally, I work exclusively with business owners nowadays. So, It's people with business owners who want to go from good to great. And the reason, again, being completely honest, is it takes just as much energy to get from someone from a 0 to a 1 as it does to get them from a 1 to a 10. So very selfishly, I like watching people go from a 1 to a 10. I like someone, going through the process the first time, and then they start to ask what I still think to this day is the most scary, wonderful, and weird question that another human being can really ask of themselves, which is, what the hell else can I do? Right? When they realize, this thing that was a problem is no longer a problem, what the hell else am I actually capable of? Right? I thought it was just a myth, but when that question gets asked, that's a really, really exciting one. It's my favorite question that I ever see a client sort of get to a place where they can ask themselves that. But really, in answer to your question, because I'm not the only one who does this nowadays, obviously I've taught other practitioners how to do this. It's anyone who is at a place where they're willing to actually make movement. And when I say actually, the biggest... such a cliche, but like any therapeutic process, it is a process, and the biggest indicator of any success is the willingness of someone wanting to change. So I'd say if someone wants to come to me, I'd say you'd have to be at a place where you say, you know what, it's beyond curiosity now, it's an obsession that I need to release the brakes. Right? It's not just, it would be nice to see this is, life's too short, we're all going to die, I need to know what ripples I can create in this fabric of the universe before I become extinguished in some way. I want to see what else can be unleashed within me. Very often what I'm doing with someone is I'm just helping them rapidly unlearn programs that someone else gave them. I'm not instilling greatness in them. We weren't born with limitations. I'm just helping them remove the limitations that someone else gave to them at some point. And when that happens, again, it's underwhelming, but you get to see some really cool things happen. So if someone wants to go from good to great or great to unstoppable, I'd say that's the person that I would personally want to work with, because I like seeing people go from 1 to 10 or 10 to 100. But if you're at a place where you feel like you're at 0, but you're willing to do anything to move the needle in the right direction, again, I could happily refer someone to be able to see you if I think they can specialise in what you need help with, and if I believe they can get the results. Which, by the way, is why all of the practitioners that we have always say, most therapists don't offer guarantees. We always say, hey, if after the first session you say, thanks for your time, but I feel the same, great. We always refund you the full program. because we never want to work with people that we can't help. So the best case scenario is always they get the result that they wanted, they expanded their business to the way they wanted, they had the relationship the way that they wanted, they made the changes with their friend, you name it. Worst case scenario is they always just got a free session with a practitioner. So that's the kind of person that we would want to work with. Someone who's beyond curiosity, someone who says, it's actually time now.
So obviously I'm a business owner, you're a business owner. How would I know if I'm in the 0 to 1 or the 1 to 10 category? Like how are you even defining like if that person's in one of those two states?
Okay, there's a few different avenues we can go here. I'll explore a few pieces. There are particular statements that I can say to, I'm not going to ask you now because it might be a bit personal, but if let's say I got someone on a call and I said on a scale of 0 to 10, let's look at the statement, I'm not enough. 10 being, Scott, that feels 100% true. 0 being, what are you talking about? Of course I'm enough. People will always, and I mean always, instinctively know where they are. Right? You know if you're above a 5. You know if you're a 3. I could go through 5 or 6 different statements now, and people would know instinctively, I'm here, I don't know why, but I'm here, or I'm here, or I'm here. If someone says, I feel like I'm in a condition where my suffering is debilitating, they will know. Right? If someone says, I'm already successful, but my goodness, do I know there's other potential that I've been hiding from myself and others for too long, they will know. So it's not a great answer, but it's the truth. It's you'll know whether you need to go from just to a place of I just need to be okay, or I need to see what else my brain can do. People know if they're a 0 to 1 instinctively versus a 1 to 10.
Yeah, okay. And I'm curious to know your thoughts on like why, and I've been through this process a couple of times, but why we tend to plateau when we've got a business. There tends to be points where we'll do quite well and we'll get to a certain point, and I've been through these journeys a few times, and you'll just hit kind of, it almost feels like a ceiling, and you kind of just get stuck there for a little bit. Like what from your brain perspective, like why is that happening? What's going on there?
So the way that you describe that is perfect, by the way, and I'd make a slight change, a slight nuance, that very often people don't go up and then they stay. It really is like the ceiling you described. They do this. So it's almost like they hit the ceiling, they drop a little bit, then they try to go again, they hit the ceiling, they try to go again, and it's constantly this bouncing at the top. And that there is what we would normally refer to as the boundaries of an identity. Right, so it's a set of beliefs, not necessarily about, I think this football team is better than this football team. It's a set of beliefs and stories about who I believe I am as a human and what I believe the top level of those capabilities are. And so essentially it's an internal standard for what you believe you deserve, what you believe you're capable of, whether or not you have the energy or the desire to actually take the actions necessary to get there. Those are all big pieces. And I'd say that bouncing is you about to pierce through the ceiling of the top level of your current identity. So finance is normally a very, very big one to be able to, or easy one to measure this on. If you believe 100 grand a year is a huge amount, then you might start to go towards 100 grand, but then there'll be some sort of sabotage. And it could be in not learning a new skill. It might be in tricking yourself into feeling you're comfortable. Whatever it is, there'll be some sort of excuse or internal resistance that says, that's not you, stay in your lane. Right? And so that's what that resistance is. But again, no one was born with that layer. They had to learn that at some stage, whether it was through repetition, whether it was through the environment around them, whether it was through trauma, whether it was in some sort of altered state through watching a TV show. They're called programs for a reason, right? And so when they get to that level, it's the internal resistance that says, nice one, but that's not you. And so what my job is to do at that point is when they've been doing this and they've been bouncing at the top layer, that top ceiling, is to be able to shift the thermostat as to where they believe they actually are on that scale of what they deserve, what they're capable of, whether they're enough to achieve those things. It can come in all sorts of forms, that resistance, by the way. Imposter syndrome, beliefs about the world. It might be if I achieve that level of, let's say, wealth, people are going to come after me. People are going to scrutinize me. I'll lose friends. I'll lose loved ones. I mean, any excuse you can think of, the brain will use it. And there's a very particular area of the brain, normally in the limbic system, and it's gorgeous at finding the best possible story that can stop you in your tracks in that moment. And no one knows it's an excuse until in hindsight. right? So if you were, let's say you were running towards a race and you're about to get to the finish line, I could try and shout things to you to try and distract you, and yet there are going to be other stories that will make you turn your head more, even if they're not true. So if I suddenly said, you might want to slow down because it looks like it could be a little bit bumpy ahead, and you go, well, hang on, I know it's not bumpy ahead, it's fine. And then your wife says, I think your son might be in slight danger. In that moment, even if it's not true, it's enough to stop the race, to look, and to actually, maybe I'll just go back to see if he's okay. It really can be that kind of level of storytelling that your brain can tell you that will make you stop in your tracks. But you won't realise until after the race is finished, after you've checked, that, oh gosh, that was only just a story, it wasn't true. And that happens every single day, especially with people listening to like a podcast like this.
Why do you do this? Like, what motivates you to do this as a job?
You know what? That is not a question I was expecting. Sometimes I think it's maybe, Tom Billy refers to it as the shout and echo effect. I got quite lucky when I first started 11 years ago. I started to see results, and those results became addictive. And so maybe there was its own form of hedonic treadmill. So I suppose it fulfills some wonderful needs. I feel significant when I do it, when I was able to help facilitate change. I've been able to grow through using this. There's a sense of certainty. I know the results I'm looking for, to the point where I would beat myself up very badly if I didn't see those results even in the first session, if I'm honest at this point. There's plenty of variety as well that comes with it. It's a sense of contribution. I once stepped away from this a couple of years ago, just for a short period of time, and that need to be able to make a difference and help people in any way, it wasn't being met, and I felt that in a way that I wasn't expecting. So what motivates me? Again, I'd love to give a very wonderful, deep spiritual answer of, I believe greatness exists in everyone, Mike, and I felt like I was put on this planet to really help people just, unlock what was in them. And it's like, no, it meets my needs really well. And because of that, because there is pride attached to it, it's made me very good at it. It's a wonderful experiment that I heard, must have been a year ago, where who would you rather save you? The paramedic who cares deeply about your life, or the paramedic that can't stand for his stats to go below a particular level? So you've got one person who goes, cool, I want Mike to live, and the other person who says, I can't have Mike die because it's going to make me look terrible. It's an interesting experiment, right? Because one of them, even though the intentions might not be that pure, one of them has his entire identity and his pride and his ego and his desire on the line, and the other one just has his sense of altruism on the line. So even though I might not get on with the paramedic, or maybe I might not believe in his intentions in the same way, or her intentions in the same way, I'd probably pick the one that actually can't bear for me to die. That's probably the one that I'd want to be at my service. What are your thoughts on that?
Which of those two would I pick?
Yeah.
Oh Jesus, I was just going through that thought experiment in my head. I don't know. I probably would want the one that's like, I don't want him to die. I don't know, because the other one doesn't seem to resonate with me as much. I kind of want the altruistic one.
Yes, but remember, the other one, his stats are better.
He's got a better record.
Yes,
oh, okay.
Yeah,
so he's like a better brain surgeon. Okay, well then we choose one with the better stats. Yeah.
But the only reason he'd be better is because he's got more invested. Right? Obviously it's not that he doesn't care about you, it's just he's got a lot more to lose if you die. Right? The other person just wants you to live. Oh, it'd be nice if Mike lived, but there's not the same level of I will suffer if Mike doesn't live. Right? There's just more
both of them, really.
Yeah,
just them both to help me.
Get a team round with you, lads.
Yeah. I've delved into the brain a smidge, and a lot of it's come through you, and I still find it very, very overwhelming. We talk about all the different brain waves, all the different parts of the brain, amygdala, fear centers, all these different bits. I've got very, very high level knowledge. And I always love this expression that if you really truly understand something, you can explain it to like a 10-year-old. So, like, could you just walk me through now, like, what the heck is going on in this process? Because I know, like, I've been through it. I close my eyes. My finger will do something. I'll go into some sort of state. But could you just do your best to try and keep it simple for me and explain to me exactly what you think is going on in the brain and why you think you're getting these changes?
Okay. So I want to be completely transparent. I don't know. I don't actually know. I've got some ideas. I've got some theories, but I actually have no idea. And again, when it comes to hypnosis generally, I've spoken to the Stanford neuroscientists. I've spoken to the stage hypnotists of 30 years. Some of them believe there is absolutely something that happens in hypnosis that is neurologically proven. Some of the best hypnotists I've ever spoken to actually believe it's just a placebo effect, and it's leveraging every pillar of psychological bias to be able to occur. The biggest thing that I'm not hearing enough people saying, quite honestly at this point, is I don't actually think we know what's happening. We just know that this phenomenon seems to occur. It's bloody wonderful, and we seem to have found a way to allow this phenomenon to happen, pretty bloody consistently at this point. But there are some ideas. I think being able to shut down things or reduce activity and things like the default mode network in the brain, so the sense of I am Mike and I'm in this body, if we can reduce that, almost to some extent the ego. I don't like to use the word the ego because it's so convoluted, often with like a negative connotation, which is actually maybe why I shouldn't have mentioned the ego earlier when I said my ego is involved, because people would take that in maybe the incorrect way as to how it's correctly sort of used, that term. And so the default mode network, when we start to see that reduce, it means that the sense of being me with Mike and my stories and my limitations, that seems to be going away. So now I'm no longer Mike with these limitations, or I'm no longer John or Sally with these stories that hold me back. And now I have the permission to be able to see myself or see the concept of these stories as just stories. I think that's one thing that happens, that when you then have the ability to step away from the process, you start to be less invested in those stories, but you start to realize how malleable they are as well. What I believe personally is happening, I always want to be very careful the way I'm phrasing it, because I think it sounds a lot more spiritual and woo-woo than it's actually intended. But I had a conversation, must have been a year and a half ago now, maybe 2 years ago, with someone called Dr. Jill Bolte-Taylor. She had the first ever viral TED Talk, and she was a Harvard neuroanatomist, and she's the only neuroscientist, I believe, that actually ended up having a stroke in the left hemisphere of her brain. So the frontal lobes, and literally the lobes at the back of her left hemisphere, essentially went offline due to a brain hemorrhage. And all that she was left with was her right hemisphere, and I believe it was predominantly just activity at the front of her right hemisphere. And she said the way that she described experience, it was essentially a sense of nirvana, enlightenment. She was no longer this Dr. Jill Bolte-Taylor, who's that? She couldn't even remember who that person was. She was very much the sense of, I am the entirety of the universe as itself. And she said that she used that lobe to eventually, over the course of 8 years, heal the other hemispheres. Now, what I love about something that she said is that when a newborn baby comes into the world and it starts off as, let's say, just a fertilized embryo, and then it splits off into 2 cells, 4 cells, 8 cells, in the 3rd trimester, it's replicating at 250,000 cells per second. Right? It's extraordinary. And yet no one knows why is it that this cell here knew to become part of a baby's head and this cell here knew to become part of a baby's foot. Some people say, no, you don't understand, Scott. It's source, and it's source transmitting consciousness into these sources. And you've got someone like maybe Dr. Rupert Sheldrake who says it's morphogenic fields that actually create that. There's not actually enough evidence for anyone to say this is definitely what's happening, but we do know it happens. And it does seem to be that somewhere within the brain, the body, the conscious mind, consciousness as a whole, there does seem to be an innate intelligence that knows what's right for you. We have homeostasis in the body for everything. Right now, even if someone's listening to this, the complexities of what is occurring in the brain and the body, just to be able to listen to our voices, for goodness sake, is extraordinary. And it's all happening innately. And it's all happening in a way that's innate and correct for you. So I don't know if I see blue the same way that you see blue, but so far it's gotten us through this life for the last several decades pretty well, right? I have a feeling that when someone goes into this process, that we're speaking directly to the innate intelligence of the brain and body. Again, I have to be very mindful because there's nothing wrong with that, I guess, but it sounds a lot more spiritual than it's intended. And I believe that when you give the keys of healing, of transformation, of growth, of personal change over to that thing, to be able to recognize, oh, am I allowed to move this person back into coherence? I have a feeling that that's what's happening. but I don't know.
Very cool. When you say coherence, if you were to use a different word or words, how else would you describe that feeling of coherence you talk about?
Harmony. Again, going back to the points that I made earlier, I guess it's clarity without noise, unified will, next level responsibility. It's being able to see reality closer for what it is. So creative power, instant intuition, and deep knowing. I think that's what happens when someone moves into that state of coherence. I think personally, I used to use the word harmony a lot more, but I think coherence is probably the correct word. It's you're not having to second guess your actions. And when someone brushes their teeth, generally it's quite a coherent action. That's why it's underwhelming, by the way, when someone suddenly starts to take their company to the next level, or starts to take their relationship to the next level. It's something that they've been able to do very, very easy without thought is brushing their teeth. How motivated does someone need to be to brush their teeth? They're not. No one goes, oh, and then this happened. Then I get to brush my teeth. And I've got day 4. I've got to brush my teeth. It's just a very coherent action. It's all of you has come together to agree that that's the right thing. You're not second guessing yourself. You're not judging yourself for brushing your teeth again. It's very much this coherent habit that seems to have formed over a period of time that is in alignment with your identity, the way the world works, what you think is right, all of those pieces. If you can take that same level of coherence and just apply it to another area of life, you're going to see someone excel the same way that someone has excelled at learning to brush their teeth. But that's why it's transformational, but underwhelming. If you can grow your company like you brush your teeth, you're not going to be going, oh yeah, here we go, the company growing time. It's like, well, no, of course, that's who I am. That's what I do. It's just unified will. It's because there's a lot that happens. It's quite hard to use one word, and you're right. Using just the word coherence might not be the most encompassing term to describe what happens, but that does seem to be what happens. It's you living someone who is unapologetically themselves, right? Yeah. And in that way, imposter syndrome disappears, and all those things occur.
So I'm just thinking about businesses for a second, and what do you think separates the people that go out there and build a really big successful business and those that don't? So I know we've obviously got your modality and how that can help those people that are stuck or plateau, but like why is there a Bezos or Hormozy and then there's somebody that gets stuck at another level? Like what do you think are the key things? Is there any genetics involved? Is it programming from childhood? What do you think are the main drivers that separate those two types of business owner?
So there's a few things in there. I'd say the one thing, and you and I actually spoke about this last week, and I found this to be quite an extraordinary realization even for myself, that the skills that it takes to become like a living legend of a business owner versus the skills to achieve what I think most people actually want to achieve, I don't think they're the same thing. So even though I help people like radically change the way that they approach their business through the way that they are as a person, there's the old phrase, you don't have business problems, you have personal problems that show up in your business, right? So even though that's something that I do, I think the main goal that people actually want to have, at least the people listening to this, probably is that form of coherence that I've spoken about. So I just want to park that there, because what I'm concerned in the way that I answer that is I could give you the answer to what I think helps those people. But what I think would then happen is you're going to have listeners here who go, right, I need to be more like them. And I think that what you want, what most of the listeners probably listen to this want, versus what someone like Alex Hormozy or Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk, if you want to throw him in that camp, have, is they have an obsession. They have a desire that feels bigger than themselves, and they're willing to give up more than the average person is willing to give up to achieve those things. And most importantly, they're willing to take the actions necessary to do those things. I think that's the difference. They're willing to pay more of a price to probably get the same needs met, actually, that people listening to this could probably get need for a much lower cost. That there isn't the answer that I'd like to give, by the way, but I think that's the truth.
Yeah. Interesting. Prepared to give up more than most. Yeah, I can resonate with that. Yeah. Very interesting. Mm-hmm.
To be able to get the exact same needs met, by the way.
Yeah.
Right. The exact same need for contribution, growth, they're willing to pay more of a price to get those needs met. Right. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm not extremely grateful that we've got people like that doing things, trying to get people into space or trying to make those changes. But I do genuinely believe that's the difference. It's beyond that. It's an obsession. This is the only way I believe that I can genuinely have my internal needs met, is by having a company that helps change human evolution as we know it and become a multiplanetary species. There are some people who literally get that same need met from ploughing a field for the day.
Yeah, and I know people like that. They're just happy doing the very, very simple things, and I respect that as well. Lovely. Yeah, you gave me a lot to think about there. So
by the way, sorry, there probably is a genetic component as well. Things like the amount of like mental pain that someone's willing to tolerate. I think something that I once heard, and I want to be careful here because I haven't done much research into it, but I could see why it would be true, that very often a lot of these successful people, they have insane levels of energy. So if you watch someone like the Arnold Schwarzenegger documentary, he says very often, I always just had lots of energy. And so going back to that point that I made earlier about clarity, is their body generating enough energy in the subconscious blocks? I think that energy part, which some of it may be genetic as well, I think that does play a role.
Yeah, same with Tony Robbins, right? He's got a load of growth hormone pumping through his system.
Yeah, I think it's $400 to $500 worth of a particular steroid that naturally is endogenous to him. Yeah. That when the surgeon said, "Do you want me to cut down?" he said, "Well, the side effects." It's like, well, you'd have less energy.
Yeah. So someone's watching this right now, and they're feeling a bit stuck, or they've resonated with a few things that you've spoke about. Like, what could they do next off the back of this podcast?
So the first thing I'd want to know before they potentially, I mean, this is something that obviously a coach could help with, but do you actually know what you want? Right. When we spoke earlier about that unified will, I'd say that sometimes people want about 6 different things, and they probably contradict with each other if they try to do them all now. Mm-hmm. Even now, I'm aware there's a part of me that wants to grow something extraordinary, and there's another part of me that just wants to sit on the beach. Right? I know that those 2 things are there, and so it's trying to work out, okay, if they were to be unified together, what would that actually mean? And because something that we didn't speak about with the brain, I think is really important, and this is something that Brian Johnson brought more into the mainstream probably in the last year, is that people need to start seeing their brain like a company. That there are different parts that all kind of come together to give the illusion of wanting the same thing, but actually they all want different things. They all have different parts. When you were at British Gas, for example, there were employees that were showing up every day doing the work. They might not have been doing it well. They might not even have wanted to be there. Some people were slacking. Some people were doing more work than the average person, and yet you had a company called British Gas. The brain is exactly the same. There are parts of you that all want different things that, at the moment at least, until they go through a process like the one we've been speaking about, are quite incoherent. And so I think I always want to make sure, does someone actually have the clarity as to what they want, first of all? Because otherwise it's just closing your eyes and trying to hit a bullseye on a dartboard somewhere in the room, and someone is telling you, I can tell you the bullseye is not on the back of the door. It's like, the chances of me hitting that bullseye still are going to be next to none if I'm blindfolded and I'm in a dark room. So I think being able to work out what do I really want, and being able to work out what they want if fear wasn't a problem as well. Mm. And even then that will give them the first step. But I think when you can then have clarity without noise, you can have clarity with coherence. Very often, ironically, when I get someone into the first session, I say, what is it that you want? Their goal between, like, when they first come to see me versus, let's say, their second session is still very different. Because they've become a lot more coherent since then. They realise, actually, now I can have clarity without any of the noise. I want to be able to do this instead. But I still think the first great step for someone is to work out what area or direction do I want to consistently be able to move in, even if I know it's not perfect to begin with. I say that would be the question I'd encourage someone to ask themselves listening to this. So not what exact direction, because that will likely change as I become more coherent, as I get more rewards, as I go through the process, as I learn more lessons. But what area? If I've got a compass or I've got a map, as opposed to looking at a very particular degree, and this, by the way, flies in the face of most advice. Most people advise that you need to know exactly where you want to go. It's like, but you're doing it as someone who's poor. You're doing it as someone who you're trying to create a goal through a lens of limiting beliefs. Right? That's not going to be the best goal possible. It's like asking a drunk person what they want to do at 2 a.m. It's like they want something very different to the version of them that's sober the next day. Actually, I'll have another beer and a kebab. It's not the best goal. So I'd say to start with, have an area, have a direction that you want to be able to go in, and then to take the smallest but the most realistic action you could towards that. So start with an area, not a very specific North Star, because I don't know anyone who actually achieved their exact 5-year goal, because that goal changed in that time.
Anything we've not covered?
There's a few questions I wouldn't mind asking you. What do you know your audience better than me, obviously. They're going to have heard some stuff, even if it's resistance that's come up for them. What are the questions that you wish, or that you could imagine, would show up in the comments? Whether it's skepticism, whether it's excitement, whether it's, oh, he said this, but I wasn't quite sure what he meant. Do you think there's anything that they would say that maybe we could make sure we address for them?
I think just the thing that comes up straight away is just the resistance I had before we started doing the work together, and it was like, will this actually work for me? That was always the block I had.
Yeah, that's a big one. Is it actually possible? Will this work? In fact, something that I taught the practitioners that I've trained over the last year. And this is taken directly from Alex Hormozi, who's a genius, but it turns out I think it's true in the therapeutic realm as well, that this process that I've been speaking about isn't a silver bullet. It's like a million platinum BB bullets. It's not that we're doing one thing very well. It's not like we're playing one instrument and doing a great solo. It's we're conducting a whole orchestra. It's not about doing, it's not just the subconscious element that's important. It turns out that the pre-talk beforehand, the post-talk afterwards, and the debrief, the setup before even the first session, all of those things all play a part in the transformation that someone makes. So if someone says, oh, well, so this is the new silver bullet, or someone goes, I really want to learn this because then I've got the magic tool. It's like, no, it's not one tool that you have to learn to be able to do this. It's not one tool that I'm taking someone through. Superconscious breakthrough therapy is just a nice word for it, and that name might change. It used to be high performance therapy before it changed to superconscious breakthrough therapy, because that seemed like a more a better description as to what the process actually was doing. But I might change it in the future. It might evolve. But what it is it's doing like 100 or 1,000 mini things very, very well to create this extraordinary process on the top. And one of those pieces, the reason I'm telling you this, is because one of those pieces is trying to help someone understand, before we even start the process, why it can work for them. Exactly the things that they need to do to make sure it doesn't work, the things they can do to ensure that it does work. But I think there's a difference between being a cynic and maybe being a skeptic. I'd say to a skeptic, don't just be that. Be a practical scientist and test it. Because what you did is you said, I'm not sure if it's going to work, but let's do something. And we only decided what we were going to work on for those brain scans about 10 minutes beforehand. And that was like a quick 15-minute session where we didn't even do anything to any depth. But even like 18 months later, you were in your 40s and became the strongest you'd ever been in your adult life. And it's only now that you've started to change those pieces to work more on stretching and flexibility, obviously, as aging plays a bigger role. So I'd say with anything, don't just take my word for it. Be a practical scientist. Test these pieces. And it's only through testing that you'll really know. Because at the moment, and maybe this is the last point to finish on, is that the way that people learn, and this is something that kills me because I love listening to a podcast, I love listening to an audio book, but the parts of the brain that generally need to be activated to be able to take in information like this aren't the same parts of the brain that can create the information in the body to take the action necessary. So even as I'm describing the process, even as I've been giving all the different pieces of information I have throughout this process, it's always going to be so limited because of the parts of the brain that you're having to use to digest the information that I'm telling you.
Yeah, incredible. If people want to connect with you, Scott, where can they go? How can they find you?
Yeah, we'll just pop some links below and they can click that if they want to, or they can forget about me if they want to do that as well.
All right. Well, thank you. I think that's third time now you've been on the podcast. So thank you for coming back, my friend. And always love hearing about what's going on and the progression you're making with these wonderful clients. So thank you for coming to share that with us.
Thank you ever so much for having me. We've always had a blast whenever we've done these things. So hopefully this will be the best one so far.
Yeah. Thank you, mate. Cheers. Thanks everybody for watching. Cheers. Hey, thank you so much for getting through to the end of the podcast. You are in the select minority and I honour you for doing so. I hope you enjoyed Scott. The link for him is down below. I've worked with him. I've been a client of his. Some of my clients I've recommended to go and be clients of his as well. We all got incredible results. So you've got nothing to lose. Book a call in with Scott if you feel like there's a good fit there. And if you like these snazzy bad boys, these glasses here, these are blue light blocking glasses from Raw Optics. And using the link below, you'll actually get 10% off. I've been using these for over 4 years now, and I love them. I had problems with my sleep for such a long time, and this forms part of my toolkit to block out the junk light. Really, really good. You can buy cheap ones. I've tried the cheap ones, they're not the same. And the other thing I would say is these are very robust. I've got a 2-year-old. He likes to smash them around the house. And they survived all those smashes. There's no scratches on them. He likes to crunch them all up. And I stay calm. I stay calm because I'm sleeping well because I've got the glasses on. Anyway, the link for those glasses are down below. And that's about it for today. So thank you so much for being part of Take a Deep Breath. If you like what you've seen on this channel, we've got loads of other podcasts. You can check those out. We've got hundreds of breathing exercises. And I'm going to link to a couple of videos now. You might want to check some of this stuff out. And thank you so much for being here. Take care. And we'll see you on another video very, very soon. Cheers.